Grants Hollow, a small town tucked deep in Oregon's misty hills. 6,000 residents, one main street. Everyone knows everyone. And for years, nothing ever happened here. Until March 12, 2005. That was the morning this town stopped sleeping. Because that was the morning 14-year-old Emily Carter vanished. Her mother, Lily, went to wake her for school. The bed was still warm. Her phone was charging. The door slightly open. At first, the police thought it was a runaway case, but that theory died quickly when they found something strange just a few feet from the roadside, half buried in mud. A silver bracelet. On it, one name was engraved: Lucas. No one in town knew a Lucas, and yet that name was about to tear Grants Hollow apart. Emily was quiet, polite, the kind of girl teachers described as responsible. But she had a strange gift. She drew, constantly. Her sketchbook was filled with dark rooms, broken windows, and faceless people. Her mother once said, Emily's drawings always looked like someone was standing behind her. Her best friend, Sarah Jenkins, remembered one last phone call the morning she disappeared. She said, "I saw him." Sarah asked, "Who?" Emily just went silent. That morning, Emily put on her blue jacket and black backpack. She was supposed to take the 8:20 school bus. The driver confirmed she never got on. But 3 hours later, investigators checked the town's only security camera. It showed Emily stepping off a different bus, 60 miles away, on a dead road outside a ghost town called Shady Pines, a place that hadn't been inhabited in nearly 15 years. Someone had taken her there, someone who knew where the cameras were blind. And after that, Emily Carter simply disappeared. Captain Tom Reese had been a cop for 20 years. He'd seen accidents, suicides, even a murder, but nothing like this. Within days, the entire town was searching. Volunteers, local rangers, even students from the nearby college. They combed through the woods, the back roads, the empty factories. On the third day, a search team discovered an abandoned building just off Shady Pines Road. An old processing plant, rusted doors, smashed windows, the smell of wet concrete and metal decay. When officers entered, flashlights cut through the darkness, and then they saw it. On the far wall, written in fading red paint, 3 names: Grace, Lucas, Emily. Emily had been missing for 3 days. But Grace? Grace Holloway had disappeared in 1998. And Lucas Miller in 2003. All from towns within 40 miles of each other. 3 names, 1 wall, 1 person who wanted them remembered, together. Within a week, every streetlight pole in Grants Hollow had Emily Carter's face on it. Missing since March 12th. Her photo was printed on milk cartons. Local news anchors repeated the same words every hour. 14-year-old girl vanishes. Possible abduction. At night, volunteers searched the forests with flashlights, their beams flickering through rain and fog. But there was something else spreading faster than panic. Rumors. Some said Emily ran away. Others whispered about a man in a black pickup truck seen near the bus stop. But one detail never made sense. That bracelet. The name Lucas. Police ran the engraving for prints. Nothing. No record, no match. But one officer, a rookie named Mark Denslow, typed Lucas Miller Disappearance 2003 into the database and froze. Lucas had vanished from a town less than an hour away on the exact same date, March 12th. Same date, 2 years apart, different children, one pattern. But the truth is, Lucas wasn't the first. Lucas Miller was 11 years old when he disappeared in 2003. A shy kid, loved building model trains with his dad. One morning, he left home to catch the school bus. He never made it to class. The case went cold, fast. His parents divorced a year later. There were no suspects, no ransom, no body. Just a single haunting clue. His backpack, found hanging on a rusted fence 2 towns over. In 2005, Emily's case brought his name back to life. Detective Reese reopened Lucas's file and compared timelines. Same time of year, same 30-mile radius, same pattern of disappearance, leaving for school, never arriving. The town's horror deepened when a retired deputy mentioned something else. Back in 1998, another child, Grace Holloway, had gone missing in nearly identical circumstances. And on that factory wall, all 3 names were together. Grace, Lucas, Emily. Someone had been collecting them. And soon, that someone would speak. 3 years passed. By 2008, the posters were long gone. Emily Carter was presumed dead. Her parents had moved away. Then, at 2:13 a.m. on May 4th, a phone rang in a small apartment 300 miles from Grants Hollow. It was Lily Carter's phone. A faint, shaky voice said, "Mom, it's me. It's Emily." The line crackled. Her mother froze. "Emily, where are you?" But before she could answer, a deep metallic noise cut through the static, like a door slamming shut, and then silence. The call was traced. It came from a disconnected number, pinging from an area outside Seattle, an abandoned warehouse district. FBI joined the case. They sent a search team. Inside one of the warehouses, they found an empty room. No signs of a struggle. Only one thing. On the wall, written in black marker, "I'm still here." It was her handwriting. If Emily was alive, who had been keeping her? 3 years after that phone call, 2011, a teenage girl stumbled into a gas station on Route 9, barefoot, trembling. Her clothes were torn, her hair matted with dust. She said her name was Emily Carter. The clerk called 911. When officers arrived, she was sitting on the floor holding a small notebook. In it were sketches, faces, locked doors, rooms with no windows. DNA tests confirmed it. It was her, 17 years old, alive. But there was something wrong. She barely spoke. She flinched at loud noises, and when asked where she'd been, she only said 3 words: "Lucas took me." But Lucas had been missing for 8 years, and as far as anyone knew, he'd never come back. If Lucas was gone, who the hell was in that room with her? The day after Emily was found, police brought her back to Oregon, back to Grants Hollow. Her mother waited at the station, tears in her eyes. But Emily barely reacted. She looked out the window the whole drive, murmuring only one word: home. When investigators asked her where home was, she didn't say her address. She said, "The place with the door." Detectives followed her lead to an old steel factory on the edge of town, abandoned since 1999. Inside, everything was covered in dust, but there was something chilling. On one of the concrete walls, faint outlines of small handprints, layered in different sizes and different years. They searched deeper. Down a stairwell, behind a half-collapsed door, was a small, windowless room, a mattress, a mirror, chains, and a video camera mounted to the corner, its light long dead. The SD card inside still worked. The footage showed a dimly lit room, a child humming softly. A boy's voice in the background says, "Stay awake, Emily. Lucas doesn't like when you sleep." But Lucas had vanished 8 years before that video was ever recorded. Forensics analyzed every inch of that factory. DNA from at least 3 individuals was confirmed: Grace Holloway, Lucas Miller, and Emily Carter. Each had left traces years apart, like the place had been used again and again. But there was one more sample: unidentified male DNA. It didn't match any known database, not a single record, arrest, or file. They also found something else: a scrap of paper taped to the wall, almost disintegrated. On it, a child's handwriting. Grace sleeps now, Lucas watches, Emily stays. It was written with 3 different pens and 3 different styles of handwriting. Detectives wondered if this wasn't one kidnapper, but 3 people taking turns, until the profiler from the FBI said something that silenced the room. "No," she said. "This looks like one person, one mind pretending to be 3. And that's when the name Daniel Rowe first appeared. Daniel Rowe was a high school art teacher in Grants Hollow. Respected, soft-spoken, always early. He'd taught there since 1996. He also lived alone, in a small house 2 miles from the old factory. When the FBI checked his background, something felt off. His Social Security record showed an unexplained 2-year gap, from 2002 to 2004, the exact window when Lucas disappeared. A search warrant was issued. In Daniel's garage, investigators found dozens of children's drawings, dated and labeled Grace, Lucas, Emily. And in a small wooden box, bracelets, handmade, each with a name carved in silver. When Daniel was questioned, he was calm, polite. He said he didn't know any of them. But when the detectives mentioned the factory, he smiled. Then he said, "That's Lucas's place, not mine." If Daniel wasn't Lucas, then who or what was Lucas inside his mind? The FBI arranged for a trauma specialist to meet with Emily. Under hypnosis, her voice changed. Her breathing slowed. She began describing 2 voices, one gentle, one cold. The gentle one called her sweetheart. The cold one whispered, "Lucas says don't move." She said she'd lived in the room for years, but Lucas only visited when the man was asleep. When asked who the man was, she whispered one word: Daniel. Detectives cross-checked Daniel Rowe's medical history. It revealed something devastating: a diagnosis from 1989, dissociative identity disorder. He had been institutionalized as a teenager after his own abduction. He'd survived a kidnapping. But when he was rescued, he wasn't alone anymore. Inside Daniel Rowe lived the boy who took Emily. Lucas had never died. He'd just moved in. When the FBI issued the warrant for Daniel Rowe, they expected a quiet arrest. Instead, they found his house empty. The front door was open, coffee still warm, TV still plain and old cartoon. On the kitchen table lay three things: a photograph of a young boy smiling beside a freight train, a silver bracelet marked Daniel, and a note written in a child's handwriting: "Don't look for Lucas, he finds you." Roadblocks went up across the state. Helicopters combed the forests, but every sighting turned into a false alarm. Then, 48 hours later, dispatch received a call from Daniel himself. His voice was trembling. "It's happening again," he said. "He's awake." Before the agent could respond, a second voice, higher, distant, almost childlike, cut through the line. "Don't hang up. Daniel's sleeping now." The trace led to a payphone less than a mile from the old factory. They weren't hunting Daniel Rowe anymore. They were hunting what lived inside him. 2 nights later, officers found Daniel sitting beside the factory gates, his hands covered in dirt, his clothes soaked through. He didn't run, he didn't speak. He just whispered, "Lucas is gone now." Inside his jacket pocket, they found a folded photograph. Emily Carter, age 17, smiling weakly at a hospital. Across it, someone had written in marker, "She was the best one." During interrogation, Daniel drifted between two voices. One, soft and remorseful, "I wanted to help them. I saved them." The other, cold and childish, "They liked the games. Grace first, then Lucas, then her." Experts confirmed what the investigators feared. His mind had fractured decades earlier. The trauma of his own abduction had created Lucas as a second self, and Lucas had grown up inside him. The boy who vanished in 1989 had come back inside his captor's skin. The trial began in 2012 and lasted 6 months. The media called it the Lucas case. 2 words filled every headline: guilty or insane. Emily Carter took the stand. For the first time, her voice was steady. She described how Daniel and Lucas were never in the room together. When Lucas spoke, Daniel would vanish, his eyes distant, his hands shaking like a terrified child. The defense argued insanity. The prosecution demanded life without parole. But the jurors weren't just listening to testimony, they were watching the man in front of them change. Midway through Emily's statement, Daniel's demeanor shifted. He smiled. Then, in a small boy's voice, he said, "Don't blame him. He's sleeping again." The courtroom went silent. Even Emily stopped breathing for a moment. The monster didn't live in the dark. It lived behind his eyes. Daniel Rowe was found guilty but mentally ill. He was sentenced to life in a psychiatric facility. Reporters said justice was served. But Emily, she wasn't sure. She visited him once. He sat behind glass, sketching with a dull pencil. When he looked up, his voice was calm. "Do you remember the songs we used to sing?" She shook her head. She didn't. Then he smiled and whispered, not as Daniel, but as Lucas, "That's because you only sang them when he was asleep." Emily ran out of the room shaking. Outside, she told the guards, "You're keeping the wrong one locked up." From that day on, she never spoke his name again. But every year, on March 12th, she mailed a blank letter to the hospital. No words, no return address, just a silver bracelet inside. 2 prisoners, one behind bars, and one still living inside her mind. In the state psychiatric ward, time didn't move. It lingered. Daniel Rowe spent his days sketching, reading, and sometimes humming a tune that no one recognized. The staff called it Lucas's song. Doctors said his personalities were stabilizing. But at night, orderlies heard 2 voices from his cell, one asking questions, one answering in a child's tone. One evening, a nurse noticed something strange. Daniel had drawn a map of Grant's Hollow, every missing person site marked in red. And in the corner, a note, "He still wants to go home." The hospital sealed the sketches as evidence, but one copy went missing. It showed a final red dot, miles outside town, at the place where no one had ever searched. The map wasn't a memory, it was an invitation. In 2014, investigators followed the coordinates from the missing sketch. The trail led to an overgrown field near the train tracks, the same tracks from Daniel's childhood photo. Beneath the grass, they uncovered a concrete slab with rusted hinges. A storm was moving in as they pried it open. Inside, a narrow stairway leading down into darkness. At the bottom, there was a single room, walls lined with drawings, hundreds of them. Grace, Lucas, Emily. Each face drawn at different ages, as if someone had watched them grow. There were no remains, no signs of new crimes, only the echo of obsession frozen in pencil and dust. They sealed the chamber that night. But before leaving, one agent swore he heard a child whisper, "He said I could come out now." Even buried, the story kept breathing. 2 years later, Emily published a memoir titled "The Girl Who Vanished Twice." It wasn't about fear, it was about survival. She described fragments, a cold room, humming lights, the smell of iron and paint. But more than that, she wrote about Daniel. He wasn't the monster was the silence that made him. The book became a national phenomenon. Yet Emily refused interviews, refused cameras. She lived quietly in a cabin outside Portland. One reviewer noticed something eerie. Each chapter ended with the same 3 words: Grace, Lucas, Emily. Some stories don't end with answers. They end when the storyteller finally stops running. 2018, 13 years after her disappearance, Emily visited the hospital one last time. Daniel was older, thinner, but his eyes were calm. She sat across the glass and said only one sentence: "I forgive you." He smiled, not cruelly, not kindly, just a faint, tired smile. Then he asked, almost curious, "Do you still talk to him?" Emily didn't answer. She simply pressed her bracelet to the glass. It read Lucas. When she left, the security feed caught Daniel humming again, the same melody the staff called Lucas's song. Forgiveness didn't free her. It only reminded her who was still listening. Years later, people still visit Grant's Hollow. The factory is gone, the field sealed beneath concrete. But every March 12th, Flowers appear on the roadside where a bracelet was found. No one ever sees who leaves them. Emily lives quietly now, away from the noise. Sometimes she records short messages for victims' families, reminding them that survival isn't about forgetting. It's about learning to live with the echoes. She once told a journalist off record, "I didn't vanish twice. The first time, I disappeared from the world. The second, I disappeared from who I was." And somewhere, in an old hospital room, a man hums a lullaby to no one, each note fading like the name carved in silver. Some disappearances end in silence. This one never really ended at all.